Hi, welcome to the How to Install Debian guide. So today I'm going to run through how to install Debian 8.5. At this point I would have expected you've made a boot CD, you've managed to boot it up through your BIOS, and you're now presented with this screen. It's all pretty straightforward, and I'm expecting if you're the kind of person that wants to install Debian, you probably already know what to do, but I'll run through it step by step. So you've got multiple options. We're going to choose graphical install option. This provides a nice little GUI for you to run through with your installer. Select your language, select your location, and this sets the keyboard and language preferences for your final installation. However, if you do want to add in multiple language packs later, that's totally doable. Australia, that one. At this point it's just sort of scanning through what components you've got installed on your computer, just trying to work out how it can access the internet, adding in a few basic package managers just to get the actual installer working itself. So at this point it's now trying to connect to the internet. So in terms of this computer, it's connected via a LAN, so it's had no trouble getting the Ethernet drivers from the kernel module. However, if you've got proprietary drivers required, at this point you may need to download them off the Debian website and manually place in a USB. If it prompts you to do so, there's plenty of guides online showing you what to do. So the first thing we're going to do is enter in a host name for this system, and this is sort of used similar to your Windows local group name. So it might be used to say, for instance, if you've got a local server at home or an SSH. So for this purpose, we're just going to go with human factors.io. And this is pretty much meaningless because I don't intend to use this on any server. Next, it will prompt me for a root password. This is probably the most important password on your computer to keep secure. So you want to choose something with multiple numbers and characters, particularly if you're going to be using it for any server purposes. So I'm just going to put in test password. So now it prompts us for our full name. This is not going to be your username, this is sort of used as the name of the user on your account. So just make it whatever you want. Just make a difference. Enter. Now you have to select the username for your account, and this is what you'll be using to log in with, and this is what is going to be used to create your personal home directory. So we'll just leave it as human factors. Enter. And now we need to choose a password for that user. So we've set the password for the root administrator for the computer. Now you're setting a password for your own user. So I'm just going to enter in test. Click enter. And it'll ask you what time zone you're in. As you can see, most of this is relatively intuitive. At this stage it's setting up a disk partitioner, and this is what you're going to be using to install the distribution. So your hard drive is comprised of different parts or segments called partitions, and each partition is allowed to install an operating system on it. So what we want to do is we want to go down to manual. However, if you're planning on only having just Debian on your hard drive, click guided use entire disk, and if you want an encrypted disk you can follow these options. One thing to note is be very careful at this stage if you are using a multiple distribution setup. So if, say for instance, you've got Windows installed on one half of your hard disk and you want to have Linux installed on the other half, please read what you're doing, because it's quite easy at this point to completely overwrite your entire data on Windows. So we're going to go with manual, and what you can see is it's come up and said we've got a 10 gigabyte hard drive, and of that there's 500 megabytes dedicated to swap space. So swap space is your virtual RAM, and you probably want about the same amount of that as you have your normal RAM, but the system should automatically detect that for you. So what we're going to do is, in this case we've already got a Debian installed on this, but let's just delete it. However, if you've got one, it'll probably say with Windows on it, you'll probably see something here that will say primary NTFS instead of ext4, because Windows use the NTFS file system as Linux tend to use ext4, although that's not always true. So what we're going to do is delete these partitions. And now this might look a little bit more like yours. You should have an area of free space. If you don't have any free space available and you're a Windows user, I suggest stopping the installation now, going back to Windows and using the Windows partition tool to create yourself a partition of at least 40 to 100 gigabytes for your Linux installation. Then when you return here, you'll see this free space. So what you can do is just hit the free space and it'll say, how do we want to create this? Well, we could manually go through and set up the swap space and the hard disk and the home directory and all that, but it's much easier for it just to automatically do it. But what we're going to do is just go automatically partition this free space. You can have a separate home directory. This is useful if you believe that you're going to be installing lots of different versions of Linux, and then essentially your My Documents and My Pictures and say GitHub project folder from your home directory will remain intact, but you can just install different operating systems around that. Given that I assume you're only going to be installing one Linux-based distribution, simply just click all files in one partition, continue. And as you can see, it's made up our swap space and the primary ext4 extension with 10.2 gigabytes of space. That's this one I've currently highlighted is where your Linux installation is going to be installed. Let's finish and write these changes to disk, and it will come up with a warning telling you exactly what drives are going to be changed and formatted. So if it's saying that these will be formatted, that means all the data of these will be wiped. That's totally fine because we knew it was free space to begin with. However, if you're seeing something that you thought was your Windows partition, or it says something a bit funny like there's more things and a few partitions being changed, I'd go back and double check your settings, make sure you're not about to overwrite Windows. I'm going to click yep, make these changes to disk. And now it's going to start installing the base system. And let's just let that load and I'll be back with you in a sec. Okay, so now it's finished installing the base system, you'll get a menu asking you to configure your package manager. The package manager is basically the installation software for Linux. So in Linux, rather than having to go to individual websites and download a bunch of executable files, there's something called the package manager, where all the files that you ever need download are stored on. So choose one that's close to your country, click enter. I just go with the default Debian server. If you've got a particular reason to choose another one, you can, but I've never tried it. Sometimes they don't have everything. Enter. We are not using HTTP proxy, but if you are, put in your configuration details here. And now it's just configuring the package manager. Okay, this screen here is just a popularity context, so it's a way for Debian to log what packages are being used most, and it's quite useful for the Debian developers to know this, so I recommend clicking yes. Clicking continue. It's not a private, there's no privacy concerns associated with it. We'll now start running some of the core packages it's just installed to help us build up our Debian. So by default, Debian does not come with a desktop environment. So that means, unlike Windows, if we don't select something here, when we boot up Debian, we'll be presented with only a command line. You have several options to choose from: GNOME, XFCE, KDE, Cinnamon, Mate, LXDE. They all have slightly different benefits, slightly different downsides. Some of them work better with multi-monitor setups than others. I recommend that if you're coming from Windows, use Cinnamon or Mate. I tend to prefer Cinnamon. It's developed by the Linux Mint team and has that nice little bit of polish. If you're looking for something completely full-featured and you want to be able to customize absolutely everything possible, go with KDE. If you want something very, very simple, something similar to the OS X interface, go with GNOME. So we're going to choose Cinnamon, because that's what I'm familiar with. And we don't want a web server set up at the moment. We might want the print server. We don't want an SSH server right now. But if you do want them, of course you can select it. And just double check always the standard system utilities is selected. And click continue. And it will download and install all that software for you right now. Okay, so the next menu we come to is called the Grub Bootloader installation menu. So when you have multiple operating systems installed on your computer, you need a way in order to be able to boot into them. So Grub provides a user interface when you turn on your computer, and it will ask you, do you want to boot into Windows or do you want to boot into Mac or whatever it may be. So we do want to install the Grub Bootloader, and we're going to click our default hard disk. So that should be the first disk that boots in your BIOS. I just tend to go with my default disk, and in this case my virtual machine only has one, so it just makes sense to click that one. So we'll just install the Grub Bootloader for us, and once that's done, we're pretty much finished. Now that we've installed Grub Bootloader, the installation is complete. You can eject your USB or CD-ROM that you used to install it, and log on to Debian. In the next video, I'll guide you through the first initial steps to do once you've installed it.